guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Lauren. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Today I am excited to be ranking all of my Natasha Denona palettes. It's a lot. I have so many Natasha Denona palettes that I've collected throughout the years. I would say in the last 2 years is really when I've gotten a lot of these palettes, and a lot of them were purchased during the Black Friday sales because you know I love to get a deal. You know I do. So I thought I would rank all of the palettes that I have to let you guys know which ones my favorites are, which ones I would maybe skip if that's something you want to do. And I wanted to get this up before Black Friday so that way if you were shopping the sale you could kind of know my thoughts, but of course this stands even if it's not that time of year. I have 26 palettes in front of me and they range from the big booty palettes to 5 pans to the minis to the middies. I've got a little bit of everything, so that's what we're going to get into. I'm going to have it time-stamped by category and I'm going to start from smallest and go to biggest. Before I do that though, I'm going to be ranking these based off of mostly the actual original color story, but you know I have to point out, that in most of the Natasha Denona palettes, these ones, the middies, the bigger ones, even the big shadow 5 pans, the only ones that this doesn't happen with are the minis, but all of these shadows can be popped out and you can rearrange them and reconfigure the color stories, and so for me that's a huge selling point. I probably will touch on that a little bit in this video, but I'm gonna do my best to be more about the actual palette because I know not all of you maybe want to do that, but if you have a lot of Natasha Denona at home, that could be something to consider. I will leave down below all the videos I've done where I've like moved the shadows around and had fun, and hopefully that can be inspiration for you and you can kind of look into that a little bit more if you don't know what I'm talking about. But that is a huge reason that I love all of these palettes, even if they're ranked kind of low on these rankings. So let's just get into it. We're going to start with the mini 5 pans first, and to be honest, I think these are like one of my favorites. I think they're such a good value. I believe the price on these has gone up to $27 a piece, but you get 5 shadows. I love how compact and small these palettes are. I feel like the price is pretty good. They're great to gift. They're great to travel with. I just love them. I really do. Even though you can't pop out the shadows and move them around, I still think they're like really amazing. So I have 5 here. Let's start with number 5 on my list, which I'm ranking these like as I go. Like I didn't pre-plan this. I was like, I'm gonna just feel the moment. Feel the moment. This is so tough because I genuinely like all of them, and I'm pretty picky. I feel like with the minis, since you can't change them out, I only pick color stories where I genuinely like how they are because I know I can't move them around. But I think for the number 5 slot, I think I'm gonna go with the Mini Glam. This was actually my first mini palette ever. Oh wow, I'm like unlocking a memory, but this was gifted to me from Hannah Louise posting here on YouTube for my birthday in 2019, right before everything happened. Yeah, seems like a lifetime ago. I do really love this color story. It's very neutral. It has like the perfect amount of mattes, the perfect amount of shimmers, honestly. The reason I'm putting this in here is that some of these colors, like this one specifically, goes a little more olive, and I guess I wish this was a little bit more cool toned on my actual eyes. I find when I use this, it turns a little bit warmer than I expect, especially because this is like going after the Glam palette, which is a cooler leaning palette. So that would be number 5. Still love it though. I still love that one. Oh, it's so tough. Okay, number 4, I think I'm gonna go with the Mini Love. Now this one I picked up probably the most recent out of everything here, or second recent, but really what I love about this palette, I love this matte shade. This purple is so beautiful. When I do my makeup with this, I just love it. Like something about the way that it goes with my eyes really makes them sultry and so pretty. So that shade alone is like a love, a love. There are some pinks in here. I feel like in general, spoiler alert, I guess, the Love palettes aren't really my thing, but I feel like this color alone, like how much I love it, saves this palette and put it at number 4 instead of number 5. All right, next on my list, this is the Mini Star palette. I really love this. I believe the shadows in here are actually shadows from the Star palette. She doesn't always do that. A lot of her minis that are based off of existing palettes or larger palettes that she already has in her collection usually have different shades. They're just kind of like tangentially related, but I believe this one actually does have the same shades in it. I really feel like this is almost the best of the Star palette. I don't have the Star palette, but I love like this blue in here. There's a gold, a nice like champagne shimmer. The only thing, I wish one of these was actually like a cranberry color because that's definitely happening in the Star, and I feel like that would really sum it up, but I really think this is so usable and workable, and I love that you have that little pop of color. I feel like you get a lot of range in this palette, which is important to me, especially when I'm looking at just a singular color story and I'm I'm not thinking about bringing other things in. I like that you could do daytime, nighttime, party time, like so much can happen in here, and I think it's really well done. Next, number 2, I have to give it to the Mini Zendo palette. I just love this color story. I love that you can do something monochromatic and a little terracotta. This color here in the middle, it's like a sagey taupe. Like it's taupe, but it leans just the slightest bit like a greenish color, and I find that just so unique. I feel like the tones in here are very different. I feel like you get a bit of range though. You have this nice dark purple as well. This color story really just inspires me. It looks like luxury, like it's a luxurious color story. There's something about it that reminds me of like saturated velvet, and I just love that. I love the idea of that. I love the fantasy of that. So I love this color story, and that means, and I'm sure you guys have guessed, that number 1 for me is the Mini Retro. I love the Mini Retro, okay? I do. This color story works so well for me because it's easy for every day, but I also can do something a little bit deeper, a little bit more fun for nighttime. The champagne shade in here is also so special. It's a very sparkly and like textural shadow. There's lots of like fine sparkle coming from it. It almost has a confetti look with some like sparkles that shine a little bit blue. So it's neutral, but it has just that little extra touch of magic to it. So you know I love that. Vintage taupe that's in here is just like the perfect everyday crease color for me. And this is the type of color that I would put in my crease and not even put a lid shade on. Like an actual all matte look. Like who am I? That's how much I like that color, and it just works for me. There is a nice soft pink in here, but then I feel like these greens are just so special. The olive matte is beautiful, and I feel like really deepens up more than I expect in here. And even though it's green, I feel like it really turns pretty neutral, and I can use it to deepen up any colors that I do in here without it like looking too green. But I can also get something kind of sultry and smoky and monochromatic with the shimmer. So I love this. I love it so much. Yeah, definitely my favorite mini. But really, I feel like whatever color story speaks to you, this is a great way to try out Natasha Denona's formula if you haven't before, because I do find it to be, I don't know if I want to say like super unique, but it's different if you've been used to maybe like ColourPop or like other formulas. It's definitely its own formula, and the mattes are super pigmented, and depending, it might take some getting used to, and it's obviously great to try it out for as cheap as possible before you might invest in one of these more expensive palettes. So that's my ranking on the mini palettes. All right, I do have some of the bigger 5-pan palettes. So these are not mini, they're like the bigger shadow size. And to be honest, like I'm not gonna spend a ton of time here because I really don't suggest these unless you can get them for like $10 or $12, maybe, because you can pop these ones out of the packaging, and I like them for the packaging alone as well. So like if you don't like this color story, but you have other big pans of the Natasha Denona eyeshadows, you can pop these out, rearrange your own quint, which is awesome, take it on the go with you. Like I love that idea, but I would say in general on their own, these retail around like the $50 price point, and I just think that's too expensive. I don't tend to love any of the color stories enough on their own, so I really suggest getting a steep deal. And most of these I've been able to get through BoxyCharm for like $10, $12 max. I'm not paying more than $12 for these little 5 pans, just saying. Not little, but the bigger 5 pans. But I'll still rank them for you. Easy last place, easy last place. This Jubilee palette, hideous. Oh my God, this color story. What's going on? It's really ugly to me. This came in a BoxyCharm, and I was like excited to get Natasha Denona, but I was like, what is going on with this? Because there is some range, but I just looking at it, it hurts my eyeballs, you know? They're great shadows to bring into other palettes, and I believe this shade in here is Vintage Taupe, which is the same that's in the Mini Retro, so that's nice, but as a color story on its own, no. I think the next one on my list, number 4, this is the Cupid 5-pan palette, and I think this might have been a BoxyCharm thing as well. I will say also, a lot of the time with the 5 pans, I feel like these shades tend to be re-promoted in other palettes. So even if you're getting a good deal, if you have an extensive Natasha Denona collection, definitely make sure you're not getting repeats, because I definitely have some repeats and they come from these palettes specifically. Anyway, I think this is an okay color story. It's so much shadow. I really, in general, love the smaller pans because I have so much eyeshadow. I'm not like sitting here actually going through stuff, so I just look at how big these pans are and I know they're never gonna get all the way used. I think next on my list is the Peak 5-pan eyeshadow palette. The reason this is in here, I actually love all the colors in here, but it's mostly matte, and I do like a nice variety of matte and shimmer. I'd actually prefer a shimmer heavy palette with like 2 mattes and 3 shimmers, but this one only has 4 mattes and 1 shimmer, and the 1 shimmer is like a golden color. I just want a little bit more, but I still think overall it is pretty, and if you like mattes, it might be something a little bit better. Number 2 for me, this one is the Ayana palette, and I like this because it does lean more cool toned. There are some like shades that aren't like super cool, but I really like this shimmer, and I just think it's a nice one. Again, it definitely leans different than any of the other ones here. And probably by far my favorite 5-pan in this size is the Coral palette, and this is one that was more widely available. Again, I'm not sure where all these are available because most of them I got through BoxyCharm and they might be exclusives, but this one I know was on Sephora and was like a more real palette, if that makes sense. I really like the color story on here. This middle shade is a duochrome and really pretty. It is shimmer heavy. There's the 2 mattes and then 3 shimmers, and I do think the color story is beautiful. So that one I actually really like, and I love this for singles as well. When I think of like my Natasha Denona collection as a whole, I love that I have these bigger pans to, you know, make color stories with. So that's my ranking for the larger 5 pans, but again, not really something I recommend if you're going to be spending that amount of money. I would just go with a Midi palette, which is what we're going to get into next. So I have quite the Midi palette collection. I would say this is probably, outside of the mini palettes, probably my favorite of the palettes where you can rearrange the shadows. I love the price point. I think it's up to $69 now, which is still expensive, but it's a far cry from the original like $125 or $29 that she was coming out with palettes at the beginning. Not to mention those big palettes that were like $240 or something. So I love that these are more affordable considering and in context of her brand. You get 15 shadows in these palettes, and you can pop them out, like I said, so you can rearrange them, and they're just good. They're good ones. I always have my fingers crossed that when she comes out with a new palette, it's going to be in this format. Ooh, now to rank them. That's lower. That's a little lower. All right, I think on the bottom tier of my list here, number 10, I have 10 of these like size to talk about, or at least pan size, because one of them has more shadows, but we'll get into that. On the bottom is the Love palette. I think this one might be getting phased out, but it probably will be on the sale if you're, again, shopping the Black Friday sale. I think for me, it's just that I don't tend to go with this color story altogether super often. It's obviously very on theme. It's very pink, red, purple base. There are some fun duochromes in here, lots of different textures. There's even a silver. I do think it's fun. It's just not one I gravitate to a ton, and I'm not like super inspired when this color story is like this, but I do love especially these purples and some of the duochromes when I create other palettes and other color stories. I do find myself reaching for some of the colors in here. Ooh, next is so hard. This is so tough, you guys. I know this is weird, but I think next for number 9, I'm gonna put the Zendo on here. And I think one is because this color story is disappointing to me when we talk about it as an extension of this palette. It's just like the tones are off. They're so off. This has like a luxe feel to it. There's something about the colors that just feel sexy and smooth and like amazing. And I just don't get that vibe from this palette. I do think there's a lot of range in here because you're getting the warm tones as well as the cooler tones with those blues and greens. I feel like there's a lot of those cream to matte formulas. She does those a lot. I don't dislike those, but I definitely prefer like regular powder shadows from her. So there's a little bit of that. And I just felt like sometimes the formula in here is just like a little bit stiff, just a little bit off. And then I think just again, the fact that this isn't what I want the Zendo palette to be is definitely a factor for me personally. But again, as all of these, as singles, I still do quite enjoy it. Next, I'm putting the pastel palette in here. And honestly, the only reason that this is as high as it is, number 8 on my list, and it's not 10, is because these are such unique colors to Natasha Denona's line. And when I think of creating color stories, I can create really fun things with these and pop them next to some of the neutrals and really get creative. And so I do love this palette for that. And I find it's something I like having in my collection and would want, again, almost as number 8. Like I would get rid of the other 2 before I got rid of this. That being said, you gotta love first off pastels for this palette. And I just feel like there's just a lot of great things on the market market. This is a $70 palette, and there are a lot of great indie brands doing pastels that I think are just a little bit better. There's like a duochrome in here that's like a pink, like a translucent base with a pink, and I just find that so underwhelming and not very great. Again, some of the shades in here are that cream to powder formula, and I wish they were just regular, really pigmented powder shadows. So there's that. I also like really don't love this shadow like that much. I don't know, even for pastel, some of the tones are a little bit off. And to be honest, this palette reminds me of like a bad time in my life. So there's that too. You know, that's the personal review part for me on this. But yeah, it's just not my favorite. It's really not my favorite. And I don't mind pastels, but I just think you can get similar pastels at a cheaper price point if you really just want like a pastel color story. But I can't deny I love having those little pops in my neutral palettes when I create other color stories. So there's that. Okay, kind of last in the bottom tier, I'm gonna put the Sunrise palette in here. This one's nice for a warmer color story. You do get some fun pops with the yellows. I really do like those yellows, and I find them quite unique to her line. You gotta like warm tones though, because that's really what you're getting. You get this purple, which I think contrasts really nicely with the yellows, but it's really that like singular purple. Otherwise, a pretty warm palette, that's what you're getting in here. And I just find it like, okay, you know, it just doesn't call to me, but I don't have issues with the formula. It's just fine, you know? Now we're getting into kind of the mid-tier section of these Midi palettes. You guys might be a little bit shocked to see that this one's ending up here, but for my number 6, I'm putting in the Glam palette. This is one I more recently purchased, and it was on my wish list for forever. Like, I wanted this so bad, and I finally did it, but I think I just realized, like, when this came out, I do think it was very unique, and, you know, we were kind of coming off of warm tones, getting into cooler tones, but since this palette has launched, there are just so many cool toned palettes on the market from ColourPop. Like, they have tons of stuff from ColourPop. And then when I look at this is like either really gray, like silvery and gray, or it's still kind of golden and still kind of warm. There aren't these really nice taupes and minky browns and bronzes that I want that lean a little bit more cool or rosy. That's what I was hoping from it a little bit more. And I think I had this idea in my head that it was kind of falling in line with these newer cool tone palettes, but it's not that. So I think that's mostly just like my perception and like kind of what I thought it was going to be. That's a little disappointing on it. It's still beautiful. I do think that there's some really pretty looks to be had, super glamorous. I've gifted this palette. I don't think it's bad at all, but as its own color story, not necessarily as inspiring as I thought. And I really, when I'm ranking these, I want the top palettes to be the ones that I would grab for as a color story on its own without having to rearrange them. Those are the ones I really wanted to have my top recommendations, because I don't want to assume that you at home are going to be like having this huge singles collection and all that. You might just like want one Natasha Denona palette and want to know what the top is for me. I believe we're at number 5, halfway through the list, and I'm going to put the Metropolis palette in here. I think this is still available as I'm talking about it. It was out of stock for a long time and we thought it was getting discontinued, but then it came back into stock. So I don't know if that's going to stay that way or if it's going to be phased out soon or whatnot, but I was happy to get my hands on this. Obviously this is a way bigger palette, and this does retail for more expensive than the palettes I've been talking about. This is at that higher $129 price point. It might have even gone up with all of the price increases. I'm not entirely sure. I'm putting this at number 5 because I do love the variety in here. There are blues and greens and golds and browns and warm rusty colors. I feel like it's a very pretty fall palette. It kind of reminds me of like one of those preppy like East Coast Ralph Lauren stores you walk into with the teddy bear and the stripes, like you're playing football. I don't know, that's kind of what the color story gives me, and it just reminds me of fall. And there's some really great textures in here. There's a lot of very similar golden shades in here though, like a lot of them. They're different, they are different, it's like, you know, we can split hairs, but there are a lot of those, so you're gonna want to like golden colors and warmer neutrals, but I do think that it's nice, and obviously there's a lot to play with in here, so I think that's kind of fun, and I love all the different finishes. So that's number 5 for me. Now number 4, I am putting the Retro Glam. This is the newest of the Midi palettes from Natasha Denona. I will leave my video that I did most recent with this down below. I even move around a color story and kind of make it my own, so check that out if you're interested. I do love this color story when I look at it. I think it is so pretty. It's inspiring to me. It's really fun, but you do have to like a sagey green to like this palette. There are a lot of those in here. They all are very similar. We have that one, this one. This is Oz, which is like my favorite color in the palette. Oh, Ooh, it's so pretty. I really like the look. Actually, I did. I know I was kind of complaining about it when I was on camera, but looking back at the footage, like when I was editing it, I was like, girl, what are you talking about? This looks really good. It does have some nice cool tones in here, a little bit of pink. I don't think that the vibe is for everyone, and it doesn't go super dark, so depending on your skin tone, it might not be super workable on its own. But I've also heard that people with olive undertones have really been loving this. So really, I just think this is just not for everyone. Like, this is for specific people, but I love the packaging. It's definitely a little bit upgraded, and I like the vibe overall. So that's number 4 for me. And now we get into the top 3. These are my top 3 suggestions. I think they're really great as standalone palettes for their different reasons. So I would say number 3 is the My Dream palette from Natasha Denona. This came out earlier this year. And I really love this because I feel like you get a variety of looks in here. They're neutral with some purple leanings, lots of different finishes. You even get a duochrome in here. I will say it's not like the most intense duochrome, but I think that it's nice nonetheless. And I think if you want like a nice variety of Natasha Denona where you can do a daytime look, a nighttime look, you want your palette to have like a lot of different modes that it can go into, I think this one's really great. And it doesn't go too monochromatic. So I definitely put this as my number 3. I think it's a really solid one for a more variety of looks, especially considering the next 2 I'm gonna mention. Number 2 on my list is the first Midi palette that I ever got, and this is the bronze palette. I just love this thing. I know that it is monochromatic. I know that these bronze colors can be very similar, but I don't care, okay? This gives me summery vacation vibes, luxury. I love the finishes. I love this. Then you still have these 2 kind of like outcast, darker, kind of cooler colors up here if you want to darken things up, if you want to do something a little bit different, like get out of the box. You also do have a bit of like a pink shade. This has like a bit of a duochrome to it. I just love it. I really, really do. You have to like bronzes and warm bronzes at that to like this palette. But if you do like that, I just think it's so pretty. Perfect for summer, even transitioning into fall. It's just so good. I love this one. I do. And then sneakily enough, my most recent Natasha Denona, actually not, the Retro Glam is my most recent, but right before that, I purchased the Retro palette. And you know, I gave this a lot of flack when it came out because this is the inside color story, and you guys know how much I love the mini retro, and this is not the same color story. Where are the greens, you know? I was a little disappointed in this color story when I thought of how it related to this one. Now that I have this palette though, and also in the state of life that I'm in, I don't know if when this came out if I would have liked it as much as I do now, but now I love, this is the number 1. Easy number 1 for me. This has those like mauvey, cooler tones that I kind of want. It has a few of those like more minky colors in here, and although it leans a little bit pink or a little bit purple, there's still this really grounded neutrality to it that I really enjoy, and it's the one that I just want to keep reaching for. I feel like I can do a variety of looks. Yes, they are kind of all in the same family, and it's still pretty monochromatic overall, but they're like the looks I want to do over and over. Like, I want to do them. This is what I'm wearing today on my eyes. I just love it. I just love this. This center shade here also is a nice textured, a little bit more flaky shadow, and I love that. This is what I have on my lids, and it's just beautiful. Like, these are the single shadows I'm looking for when I'm shopping other brands, when I'm looking at other palettes, and I just think it's funny that it's the one I feel like I was like, oh hell no, when it came out, and now it's like literally number 1. Like, as soon as I actually got it, I was like, okay, maybe it's really good. Maybe it is really good. Okay. I was wrong. I was wrong. Number 1 for sure in the Midi. This is the one I'm like gonna start gifting. Like, I was never gifting this one because I didn't have experience with it. I would gift the bronze, I would gift the glam. Now I'm gifting the retro. Woo! We got a big section done, guys. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of us. Next, we're gonna move into the bigger 15 pan palettes. So they're the same amount of shades, but we have those bigger pans to them. I only have 4 of these palettes. So number 4, ranking at the bottom for me, is the Circo Loco. And to be honest, like, I knew when I bought this was gonna rank number 4 for me or bottom for me because this color story is Circo Loco, okay? No, it's super fun. This is a very pigmented, bold, saturated color story. I think that it's really fun to have this in her line. Just as a whole, when I look at this, I'm not inspired to create looks with these colors only. I want a pop of this blue with neutrals. I want some of these shades, again, with neutrals, like popped with those. And so I definitely bought this with the intention of having these as single shadows, and I've loved it for that. So for that reason, I do still love this palette. This is very like jewel toned, and I feel like there's something about it that feels like almost bohemian velvet and kind of fun and a little whimsical. Some of the colors are a little bit close together, and I do feel like they go a little bit more bold and saturated, so you're gonna wanna like that. But you know, if you're into those types of colors, this is one of the only palettes that Natasha Denona has that really offers that, at least in her current line. I feel like the next closest to this was the Tropic palette, but I don't believe that's available anymore. And that has also a lot of like light neutrals in it too. Anyway, for me personally, as its own color story, not thinking about it as singles, it definitely fits on the bottom for me. Number 3, I'm gonna put the Biba down there because this is mostly mattes. Very beautiful, like timeless classic looks can be had with this. Seriously, so beautiful, so useful, especially if you don't have a palette like this might be really great for you. If you like doing neutral looks, you like mostly matte looks, maybe you wanna do some more sculptural things, lots of like contouring the eye, you have that in here, some cooler tones, warmer tones, lots of different tones of browns depending on your skin tone and what you wanna do that I feel like could work for you and really help like sculpt and shape the eye. And I do think that is a great look, but you guys already know I love shimmers, so this doesn't really offer too many of them. The ones that it does have in here are really pretty, but I find myself not reaching for this as its own color story because of that. Like if I redid this, I would definitely add in more like cool tone shimmers and kind of round it out with more shimmers. You guys know. I would. Ooh, this is where it gets really tough because I almost feel like these two palettes are tied, which I, again, never thought I would say that. I think on principle, I know what I want to put at number 2, but to be honest, like this is one I highly recommend, especially if you think about these palettes as singles, okay? And I did not think that I would say this because this was such an easy pass for me when it came out. But number 2, I'm gonna put the Trio Chrome in here. This color story is stunning. How did I not see how beautiful this color story was when it came out? I don't know. What was I thinking? What was I on? The really big kind of sell on this palette is this middle row, which has some duochromes in it. I think they might be supposed to be like trichromes or like multi-chromes, but I find them to be mostly just duochromes. And to be honest, you know, if you have a lot of indie shadows, these are not going to wow you. They're definitely on the more subdued and subtle side. But really where this shines, and I know you just heard me say I don't like mattes, but these mattes, the colors of these mattes just send me. Look at this. Look at those 6 shadows. I can't even think of better color. I can't even try to think of better matte colors. I use these whenever I'm creating palettes all of the time. They just inspire me. They're velvety and like kind of subdued, but still saturated and still have like a story they want to tell you and whisper into your ear. I just love them. Really love this palette, especially for singles. I always build out palettes with these. Like I love them. So this is number 2. And then that means that my number 1 is the gold palette. I think this one again might be being discontinued. I'm not sure if it's available, but I do love this as a standalone palette. I just think this color story kills it. We've all seen the pop of blue done, but this might be the queen of pops of blue. It really might be. The way that the golds play with the blues and how you can get them to like so seamlessly go together and kind of create this beautiful green look. So good. Also texturally, this palette has a lot to offer, and I really wish it would do more of these textural shades. Brass, Kava, Lime Chrome, all of those are just such beautiful topper shades that really help make this palette cohesive or are great as standalone colors as well. I just love it. This is such a luxe looking color story. It's rich, it's sexy. It could be day, it could be night. Like there's just so much creativity to be had in here while still being like beautiful and neutral too. So I just love it. I love it. That's my number 1. Last to wrap this freaking video up, I do have both of the larger palettes. Like I said, I don't have the star. That one is kind of in between the 15 pan and these ones, but I have I think it's the green brown and the blue purple is what they're named. So here's the green brown palette, and I think these are so expensive. It took me a lot of time to finally buy these, and it's hard for me to recommend them at full price. No, do not. Like there's just so much shadow that you're paying for, and I love the colors. I just wish these were like the Metropolis size pans so badly. Like so badly. If you love neutrals, that lean warm, that lean green, it's stunning. It really is. I love creating palettes with them. There's some really like pretty shades in here. Holding it against the blue purple, that's what this one looks like. Definitely a little bit more saturated, a little bit brighter. I think This would be number 2 for me, and the green brown would be number 1, I think, but it's just tough. It's really, really tough because I just look at them as singles, and there are some really pretty, more like minky, cool tone shades in here that I do really like that aren't colorful. So I don't know, this one's tough. If you're gonna go for these palettes, just know that they're very expensive, and I would only do it if you're gonna get them at minimum discount, 2 for the price of 1. Like, I think I somehow got these like in a bundle plus a discount, and they ended up being about $200 for both of them. Yeah, and that was like the best discount I could find at the time. I don't know if you can do better, but really get them on the steepest discount that you can, just because it's so much shadow. And I think overall, I still really just suggest Midis for like value on use, at least in my collection, and I think for a lot of people. If you're like a makeup artist though, these ones could be good investments for you because you get a lot of shadow in here and you might not need all these other little palettes, and that could be great. So there's that as well. But they're kind of big boys, you know, they're big. All right, well, that is my personal ranking on the palettes that I have in their categories, how I rank them. Really, you could take like the top 1 or 2 from all the categories, and those are really my top suggestions if you're thinking about getting a Natasha Denona palette. But obviously, Color Story is so personal. So I'd love to know what your top rankings of the palettes are. What's your favorite out there? Which ones do you not like? Let us know down below. I really hope this video was helpful if you're navigating the sale or just navigating, trying to find which one's best for you. I actually had just like moved all my shadows around, so to prepare for this video I had to put them all back. It was like a whole process, but glad I can do it. I'm so glad that these can kind of function as palettes and singles in my collection, and I do find them just so special and so amazing for that, especially when we're talking about that like more luxury price point and artistry price point. Not a ton of brands in that category do that, and I do find that so special with her shadows. So I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and other than that, I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.